I hope that's how the
Let
live.
that old man into the Zoom room. Our dad. Yeah. Hello, everybody, and welcome to Mumbo Jumbo Community Conversations. My name is Chinyelu. I will be our conversation facilitator tonight as we continue our discussion of the Four Agreements, the book by Don Miguel Ruiz.
Please.
That's
That's
real. Hold on, he can't hear you. Uh, are we good? Okay, I think we're good. Sorry, audio challenge. But as we continue our discussion of the Four Agreements by Don Miguel Ruiz, it's a short book that's really about that provides a framework for moving through life in a way that's free, that is unburdened by like fear and anxiety and insecurity, and just some agreements that you can make to help you do that with yourself. So. Last session, we talked about the first two agreements. Does anybody remember what the first two agreements are? Nobody?
is one of them is one
I
of
wasn't
them
even here last time.
have an impeccable word or something with
Yes,
your
that's the
impeccable
first one. Be impeccable with your word.
with your word. That's me.
Yeah. And the second one?
I pass it the spirit.
Believe number 2 is don't make assumptions.
That's number three. That's one of the ones we're going to talk about today.
And it must
Number
be
two,
always do your best.
that's number four. We're also talking about that one today. Is
Number 2?
number two is don't take anything personally.
Man, I was thinking that
Yeah.
was number 4. I'm all mixed up.
Yeah. Hey, no, all good. We'll talk about it today. So yeah, Mimi gave it away. Today we'll be talking about agreements three and four. Don't make assumptions and always try your best. And because this book study is happening in tandem with a conflict transformation workshop hosted by Scarabus Consulting, we'll also be talking about how these agreements can help with conflict transformation. Anyways, that is a long summary of today's discussion. Um, for now, let's get started with check-ins. For those of you who are, maybe new to the space, watching the live stream, or who just haven't had the opportunity to, be with us at a Kepler event before, the check-in is just something that we do, a little ritual that we practice to make sure that we're maintaining an awareness of everybody in the room, where everybody's at, what everybody needs, and and we're putting people first and making and taking care of our community. So typically, what that looks like is everybody will give a number and a color where they are that are both supposed to kind of represent how you're feeling in that moment. Um, and then we'll have an icebreaker question as well to get to know each other a little bit more on the deeper level. Um, Let me see. Does anybody have a suggestion for a check-in question today? You said your favorite type of milkshake? All right, I'm with it. Start us off, Khaled, since you made the suggestion.
Um, 9 purple. Um, and probably Oreo.
All righty. What's up, y'all? I'm feeling like a mint green, like a mint ice cream green, like a 7 right now. And my favorite flavor milkshake is vanilla. And I'll pass it to Mello.
My I'm thinking of a reddish, and my favorite milkshake is strawberries.
What's your number?
Hey, Mello.
9, 2. Hey, Dad. I pass it to my dad. Dad, I'm passing it to you.
Thanks, son. I couldn't get it off mute. Green, 8, Kahlua, and cream. For those that know, for those that don't, sorry for you. I'll pass it to
Oh my goodness.
Tara.
Hey y'all, I'm feeling like a spicy blue 8, and I'm right there with Mellow at strawberry. And I'll pass it to the Lala.
Thanks, Tara. Hey guys, I'm feeling like grass green. I'm an 8, and I'm there with Chinelu. I think vanilla milkshakes all the way. And I'll pass to
Significantly underrated.
what he said, and I'll pass to Mimi.
Hey y'all, I'm feeling like an opalescent pearly color with a little like amethyst shimmer to it. I feel like a swirly 9, like it's a 9, but if you looked at it as a number, it would be kind of like mixed up. And I like a good healthy milkshake at home, some spinach and hemp seeds and soy milk and berries and bananas. But
Ooh.
there's also this place in Cincinnati called UDF, United Dairy Farmers. It's like a gas station, but if you're from Cincy, you know that their milkshakes are unbelievable, and a chocolate peanut butter banana UDF milkshake is one of a kind.
That
Yeah.
sounds good.
And I'll pass it to P. Fair on her exercise bike.
The alarm clock went off just as I was going up for dinner. And I said, Paulette, if you don't exercise when your clock goes off, you'll never get back to it. I'm a yellow 10, and what was the question?
What's your favorite kind of milkshake?
Chocolate brownie, dark chocolate brownie, graders. Everybody's dark chocolate brownie milkshake is not going to be the same. Graders is so thick you can eat it with a spoon. I love it.
And then I think we still haven't heard from J. Rue. We still haven't heard from Nas.
Hey guys, I sent you a follow-up to the newsletter. Saw a couple of registration issues.
We will
All
get
right.
it taken care of.
Take a look.
I'll go ahead. Hello,
Thank you.
everybody. I'm feeling like a red and black 10 today. Let's see. I'll throw some green in there too. It's a beautiful day outside. And my favorite kind of milkshake, I also have become a Grader's convert here in the last couple of months after MMS Fair put me on. I think my favorite flavor, though, probably their Oregon strawberry, if I had to choose. And I'll pass it off to Nas.
Hey, Nas here, feeling like a purple 9.5. Say my usual, and really any chocolate milkshake. That's it. That's all.
From
That's
Dairy
what the dude
Queen
say.
on to Graders, huh? And
Yes,
everything
ma'am.
in between.
Yes, ma'am.
All
Dairy Queen is
right.
not. Dairy Queen is not equal. Sorry, soft serve is not.
I think we still got to hear from Donna as well.
Can you repeat the questions? I just hopped on.
Number, color, and what's your favorite kind of milkshake?
Number 7, but not really on a spectrum of anything. I just like that number right now. Color. I don't think there is a color. Favorite kind of milkshake? I don't really like milkshakes, but I love horchata, and I think that should count as a valid answer. I really like horchata.
What did you say?
There's agreeing nods. I think you're right, Donna.
Horchata. Said horchata. Horchata.
Oh, yeah, fair enough. Yeah, real.
Totally.
All right.
Hey, Donna.
Hey,
Hi. Where are you calling in from today?
from Chicago.
Yeah. Okay. Bet. You gotta bring the Chicago energy to Indy.
Yeah. Well, all right. Hello, everybody, and thanks everybody for checking in. Especially those people who joined us during the check-ins. Great to have y'all here today. We may have more folks join us in person or in the Zoom call as the conversation continues, and if so, we'll just wait for the natural pause within the conversation to let them do their check-ins as well. But for now, let's go ahead and get started. We'll pick up right where we left off. Just for a little bit of review, I guess. We're talking about the Four Agreements by Don Miguel Ruiz. Hold on, let me give me I guess let somebody share some reflections maybe from the last sessions or on those first two agreements while I pull up my notes from the last discussion so I can give a quick rundown on the book and the author.
It was at the last one. I know some of y'all were there. I'm not having this. I will call you out. Zalalam, J. Tara, probably Mrs. Fair.
I wasn't at the last one.
I feel like a little bit. I was so sure.
Come on,
Okay,
Miss Fair.
I also was not at the last one.
Same.
He asking for a summary of the last meeting, or just a summary of the book, or what is he asking for?
People who
I was hoping I was hoping that somebody would buy me some time while I found my notes, but I don't think that's gonna happen. So I'll go off the dome. It's okay. What'd you say?
I think he said,
No, sorry.
All right, I'm gonna keep going. So today we're talking about, or we're continuing our conversation on the Four Agreements by Don Miguel Ruiz. Don Miguel Ruiz is formerly a trained medical doctor and surgeon who has become more well known as a spiritual teacher and a leader in the world of like the Toltec spiritual faith and tradition. That tradition is based off of the spiritual teachings and traditions of the Toltecs, who were a Mesoamerican group, I believe, that predated like the Aztecs and sort of like created a lot of the cultural foundation for the Aztec culture. The spiritual tradition that this book and others by Don Miguel Ruiz is rooted in is one that really focuses on, how to live a life unburdened by fear, how to live freely, and without, uh, uh, judgment or insecurity and stuff like that. So, the first two agreements that we talked about, number one, be impeccable with your word. That one really refers to just basically the need to say what you mean and to mean what you say, to understand that words have power, on yourself and on others. And that, you should be careful about how you use those words because, your word is the power that you have to create or to destroy. The second agreement, don't take anything personally. Really about stepping out of this sort of like self-centered mindset that says that anything that somebody else does has to do with you. That it's about something that you did or because of something that you are, or that there's something about you that needs to change. And just that when you do that, when you learn to not take things personally, you can enter any interaction without fear of being, harmed or injured emotionally, because you know that people are going to do things for their own reasons, and not because of anything that you've done, before we get into agreements 3 and 4 of the Four Agreements, does anybody have anything that they want to share or reflect on about those first two. Maybe even from some of the people who weren't at the first conversation. Yeah, J.
I
Rue, Tara, you guys outed yourselves early.
I haven't thought about the second one. I think that it sounds interesting and also like it's one of those things that sounds like it makes sense, but it also feels like it's kind of antithetical to being a human being. And I'm not sure if I think that because like I live within a civilization where it's like normal to take things personally to some extent, or if I just think that like some things should be personal. And I think that
Yeah.
there's kind of an expectation of like yes, there's a lot that even I myself do that's not about specific people, but I think that there should be intention where it's like if I am coming to you about a situation or like interacting with you in some sort of way, like I want to personalize my experience with you and I want to be able to take things personally as well, you know? It doesn't feel practical to not take anything personally.
Sure. Sure.
And it kind of sounds a little disconnected.
Can I ask,
Yeah.
what does it mean to you to take something personally?
Um, I think it could be a range of things from like affection to offense, you know, of like
Yeah.
you did this thing and it is disrespectful. And I am going to take that personally because we do have like this understanding of what our relationship should be. Or like you did this thing and it was wonderful and I'm gonna like take that personally. Um, and I understand that people can disrespect you for reasons that have nothing to do with you. I think it's just the anything that's throwing me off. Like to walk around the world as though nothing is really like I don't know about you or like in touch with you.
Yeah.
How does the book define like taking something personally?
Yeah. Does anybody who's read it want to speak to that before I jump in? All right, great. Yeah. What'd you say? I will. Thank you. Do you want to speak to it?
I don't know what he said.
He asked how the book defines taking things personally. What do you think taking things personally means?
Question. Say that one.
What do you think it means to take something personally?
Um, I think it means like sometimes, like most of the time, it's a way of disrespect.
Can you hold the mic closer? It's hard to hear you.
Sometimes it can be a way of disrespect. That's most of the time, but for me, I think it's like I'm not an adult, so like I don't really get mad when my friends do things that disrespect me. But I usually just be like, hey, let's talk it out, and then we're friends after 10 seconds. But I don't have anything big to say about it. Maybe I can think about it and I can.
You're an adult? Okay.
Khalid,
um,
can you speak more to that part about how does being an adult or not relate to getting mad at your friends?
Because you guys usually hang on to it a lot longer, and when you're kids, you like see each other like every day. Not saying like if you live with your roommate and you're mad with them, it's the same thing. But like you're going to school with someone for 7 hours every day, so you have to forgive one day.
Yeah, or like younger people and like kids may be quicker to let stuff go. I think that's really profound.
yeah, and I think it also one of the things that he talks about in the book is like how children, the younger they are, tend to be more free and less domesticated, and therefore like it's a little bit easier for them to live by these agreements. They kind of do it automatically. So, yeah. But Jay Rudy, your question about how the book defines taking things personally. Yeah, I think that Donna kind of like summed it up, I think, really well. he definitely does specify that it's like it is about taking both like good things and bad things personally. You know, it's about assuming that the reason that people do things is because of your actions or because of who you are or how you are. And that, you know, the assumption that, you know, if you want to change somebody's behavior or you want somebody to behave differently or even to get them to behave the same way, that there's something about that you can do to make them do that. Yeah. And I guess that I would say, like, I think I agree with you, Donna, to a certain extent. And I think to me, this agreement, you know, I think it's like, when it's like don't take anything personally, I think it's less like a strict doctrine of like never take anything personally. And I think it's more about like understanding that most things either aren't or don't have to be personal, and then like using your discernment to decide when you want to make something about yourself or not, you know, like when you want to take responsibility for somebody else's feelings or actions or something like that. But yeah, I definitely do. I do think I agree that like I don't know. I don't think I like the idea of yeah, I guess like I can see how where this idea of like taking nothing personally as like a hard rule can be kind of like disconnecting. So I would be interested to hear some more people speak about that.
Yeah,
I think I saw
I'll
my
add.
dad come off mute and then Nas wanted to jump in.
Okay, yeah, hold on. Am I off mute now? Hold on, let's see. Okay, am I off mute? You hear me? Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
So, just something else he talks about. When somebody else talks about you, they are talking about a secondary character in their story who represents you. They are talking about an image they create for you. That image has nothing to do with you. It's just a projection of that person's story. If you take it personally, if you agree and believe what others say, their story becomes a part of your story. And if you don't take it personally, the opinions of others do not affect, well, theoretically don't affect you. I don't necessarily agree with that. And this helps you to avoid, most importantly, a lot of suffering and conflict. So I think that don't taking things personally is just that by definition. And in fact, it's really looking and thinking more about the person you're engaged with. And I think this ties directly to conflict transformation. And when people, and this is a good message for Mama and Khaled as well. I think Khaled spoke to that as well. But when young
Mello, how you
people,
doing? Come here. You got a message. Come
when
listen
uh
real
when
quick.
when young people, we're engaging and, you know, talking about, I've had Chin, all the children come home and dealt with that. And our message has always been the same. Hey, when people are saying those things about you, they are forming those opinions about you based on their references in their minds and constructs. And it all comes from them. And so you can either choose to you can choose to hold on to that in a detrimental way. You can try to extract parts of it that matter. You don't have to deal with any of it. But the fact of the matter is that you have autonomy and choice in your engagements on how you're going to deal with and receive other people. And give people grace. Hurt people hurt people. And so when people are not feeling great and feeling, not well, they're going to probably more than likely you might be in the line of fire on some of their feelings. So I think it's a bigger message about understanding others, providing people grace, and having some and building the confidence within yourself that won't allow other people to define and determine who you are.
Yeah.
Yeah, I would agree. And like part of me is definitely on the same page with y'all. I think Chin and Donna, where it's like, how can I really not take anything personally? Like I'm not the Buddha or nothing like that. So I'm gonna have a couple of attachments to a couple of things that are gonna lead me to make certain decisions. That being said, I do think there is something just like so powerful, at least it has been for me, about the idea of not taking things personally, like as a way to navigate like my relationship with people. Because like I'm definitely the people pleasing type in my own way. I'm definitely one to like ruminate, especially over like my decisions and like how I come across to other people. But at the same time, like that has sometimes led me to like taking on the emotions of other people and being able to, like it's the idea of, oh, you made me feel a certain way. And just kind of giving away my power, my agency, my control over probably the one thing, or at least one of the few things I do truly have control over, myself and, my emotion, or at least my reaction um, to my, various emotions, etc. And, just be able to say, like, this isn't about me necessarily. Like Khalil said, it's just somebody's like projection of me, or by actions, like their interpretation. And I think, everybody's going to have their own, right? Like you can't escape that. So you just got to be really centered in your own and making sure, the things you can control, you are controlling at any given time. And the things you can't control, you're able to fully let go of and move on. You know what I mean? And I agree, Kyle, with that point you brought up about, y'all being more forgiving and you just move on. Uh, that is really such a beautiful thing. And I feel like that's really the essence of friendship and companionship, when, you just, not to say you forgive and forget, but you're able to just forgive and move on and be like, hey, that was stupid, or, that made me feel some type of way, and you just keep it pushing. So yeah, I
You want to
really like
handle
that
this,
separate
Nas?
rule.
Nas appears.
Hey y'all, from the tech. Um, kind of wanted to piggyback off of what I've been hearing, and Donna, I really felt that same kind of reaction when I heard "Don't take things personally." It felt very um not intuitive as a human, and I think reframing it in my own head, I had to look at it like change your worldview from looking at yourself as the nexus point of the interaction and instead look at the broader systems that could be at play. And I think that Khalil really touched on that, saying that someone could be having a bad day and then take that on you. Or someone could have a really good day and then give you a lot of praise. Either way, there were broader systems at play that went into that interaction that wasn't just as simple as you being there, being this person at that time. Yeah, I just want to speak to that.
Yeah, I definitely like I hear exactly what you're saying, and I think that I hear it even more deeply because I think that that was maybe like that was a little bit of my resting place of like, well, I understand all of the things that informed this person being like this, and so I understand why they like did this, and it's really not about me. And I think that perhaps I had to overcorrect a little bit and be like, no, actually, like that is personal. And it should have been about me to some extent because like this is like an interaction that is like between me and whomever this person is. Um, so honestly, I think that I don't know, in order to find some equilibrium between like being like, oh, I understand your circumstances, I understand that like you're hurt, I understand how like these greater systems have affected you. Um, I at least need to start taking things a bit more personally for the sake of like my boundaries and I think how I move through the world. And so maybe that's why I also just like don't really like that doctrine, but I understand that there is merit in it.
Donna, you bring up an interesting point. Does he speak at all to like boundary setting in a not taking things personal type of world? Because I do feel like that is still a piece of it where like, yeah, if you're in an interaction, if you're in an engagement, then it's like, I'm playing a part in this too. I got some stake in this particular game we're playing right now. So does he speak at all to like boundary setting?
Yeah, I would say that that piece strikes me as something that is part of the first agreement, be impeccable with your word, which is really all about like being true to like who you are, which to me is like being true to like what you need, and what you don't need, and standing on that, whenever and wherever you go. And I think that where not taking things personally comes into play is like, you know, when you understand that somebody isn't doing, like, you know, somebody, this person isn't hurting me because of anything that I've done, you know, like this person is hurting me because they of their own shit, you know, then it makes it easier to say like, hey, I know you've got stuff going on, but this is what I need, you know? And I forgive you for not understanding that, which is why I'm telling you now that this is what I need, you know? Um, I think that there's also, and maybe, and we can talk about this a little bit more in the agreements 3 and 4 when we get there. But I think that don't make assumptions is also a big part of that. But Mimi, hand up.
Yes. This has like been a really good dialogue so far. I've been enjoying just
Oh
listening.
yeah, we're off to a great start.
Yeah, it's already very juicy. And it's interesting because that was one of the things we did talk about, Donna, when we talked about this agreement before. And I brought it up, like sort of struggling between this idea of, and I don't think it has to be a contradiction, but it can feel like it, between this idea of not taking anything personally, but also having accountability, and taking responsibility. Um, and I think that Nas spoke to it very well, this part about worldview, because I think that, like, I heard this idea of, like, well, to take things personally is part of being human. But I think that what it means to be human, or what it means to be a me or to be a you, is culturally constructed. It's informed by the stories that you're raised in, that create your understanding of reality. And I think that the Toltec worldview comes from some fundamentally different paradigms than what a lot of us were raised with. And I think some of the elements of it is the idea that reality is a mirror. We are all dreaming while we are awake, and we are projecting the experience. Everything that we experience is a projection out of our own minds, and we are creating our reality. We are, you know, he says, you're the writer, the director, the producer, for what you experience in life. And also, the Toltec worldview sees like all of humanity as one organ, on this planet, and like each sort of species and group of animals or plants and different elements are different organs and systems within the larger living organism of Earth. So there's some like just fundamental paradigms, worldviews, things about the idea of reality that are very different. And the last thing I'll say on it, I was thinking about how it was my experience and a lot of people I've talked to who read this book that don't take anything personally. For a lot of us is one of the most difficult things to practice, but when we do, also one of the most liberating things that we've ever done. And I was thinking about why is that so common with people that I talk to, that this is the hardest one. And I do think that some of it is tied to a culture that can often be very rooted in this belief, this construction that we are separate, that is very like individualistic and very invested in the idea of self as separate from others. And there are a lot of cultures that don't operate that way.
Right. Mimi, I think I
There,
want to speak to that piece about that collective feeling of liberation after an experience where you don't personalize an experience to the self. And I think that that's part of the goal of this framework that I'm seeing, or I hope it is, maybe, or maybe it's a result of. Because when you are at a place where you can look at a situation and say, this isn't all about me, there's more things happening. And then the middle ground of I'm still an important aspect of this and a collective aspect, an additive aspect. This part of this situation wouldn't exist without me. And I think that after you sift through all of that, you can probably find areas where you have real power, you have real agency. And I'm hoping, I think we're getting there. Because I think y'all with me?
Yeah, but I do want to ask you a question.
Talk to me.
What does it mean to you to be I? Like when you say, I have to look at myself in this situation, and my role and me. I have to look at me. I have to look at I. What is that? What is me? What is I? What does that mean to you?
My personal definition would be the characteristics of myself and my interpretation of my experience. And as they change, I think I notice. Then I attach to the ones that I want, or the ones that I miss, or the ones that I hold dearly to me. And after so long of doing that, kind of built up a little eye for myself. And that's where I'm at now. And I think touching on those places, the places you want to keep, the things you want to keep, the things you don't want to keep, the things that you attach to yourself, things identity. Um, this aspect of looking at not everything is you in your head or outside, externally, internally, your perception. Not everything's you. And this is helpful to not personalize all of your experience. Some things are just a product of, some things are a result of your environment.
Thanks. You're
Thank you.
very deep. Like you, I don't know, you lived some spiritual things, studied some spiritual things. Maybe you've been around this planet a few times. Thank you for sharing that.
Much appreciated, Mimi. Thank you.
Does anybody want to touch any more on that piece around that first agreement of being impeccable with your word? Maybe tie that to this idea of, not taking things personally, how they fit together.
I'm not sure on the tying it back part yet, but as far as being impeccable with your word, I feel like that's something that I recently have started practicing, like honestly within the last 6 months, of just being like, I keep my promises to myself and to like other people, and it's made me more selective as to like what I do agree to commit to. Um, and it's also been kind of exhausting sometimes when I do agree to commit to something and in the moment I really meant it, but then I come across in the future, and whether it be to myself or for others, like I think about it, I'm like, dang, I really don't want to do this, but like I said that I would. And so I think that it's making me realize like the impact of like what it means to, I don't know, say yes or no or come into an agreement or like set a boundary for something. Um, but it's been a nice practice. I would say it's like made me look at myself and how I move through the world differently, like with a little bit of pride too. I think especially after having done Ramadan, which was like another sort of thing with myself where I was like, I want to keep my word and my commitment on this, like for myself. It sort of taught me that like I can do it. Like I can tell myself that I have a goal or like tell other people that I'm going to show up for something and actually do it. And I think it's made me trust just like my visions for the future and also like my aspirations for the future too. Cause I'm like, well, I've committed there. Like I've brought like this thing to fruition. Like I can surely do it again.
Yeah, girl. Ugh,
Yeah.
that is so beautiful. I just want to say, like, I'm very big about building trust with yourself through like small commitments you make and keep to yourself. That's really beautiful that you've been doing that.
Yeah, thanks.
I also think that piece you said around, like that experience of like, oh, I agreed to this, but now in the moment, I don't want to do it. I think that like that admitting when your mind has changed is a very important part of being impeccable with your word, because I think that like, part of being like, I think the essence of being impeccable with your word is just like, accepting yourself as you come, and not fighting those things about like, like not making judgments about yourself and how you should be, and just and so yeah, but I guess like what I'll also say is like, I think sometimes being impeccable with your word is also being like, I've changed my mind about this and I'm not gonna do it now, and and I think that this is where to tie them together, like where don't take things personally comes in, is because like that upsets people, you know, and I think it's important to remember sometimes that like you know that upset is not something that you have to take personally, Um, so yeah. I also see Dominic. Dominic has joined us. So I would love to have you check in with us, bro. What's your number, color, and your favorite milkshake? Is from question today.
Hey, I see like my number five color brown. My favorite milkshake's the question.
Mm-hmm.
Um, Either like a birthday cake or like a cookies and cream.
All right. Hell yeah. Hell yeah. All right. Anything else anybody want to speak to on those first two agreements before we move on to the third one? All right. Yeah. Great discussion so far, y'all. And thank you, Donna, for providing us with with such a great starting point. So yeah, let's talk about Agreement 3. I've got a few notes here that I'm gonna go through real quick, just like a few of the key points from that agreement. And then maybe we can have some discussion after that, similar to what we've been doing. Agreement 3 is don't make assumptions. Um, and I think that what this one comes down to is just that we make a lot of assumptions, and really they're uh, assumptions like rooted in our own experience that we apply to our expectations of how other people will or should act, so we think that because I think this is fun, some other people should think this is fun. Because this is important to me, I assume that it's important to my partner, and basically according to the Toltec way, these assumptions are the cause of a lot of like conflict and turmoil. Um, One of the things that they said about assumptions that really stuck with me is we make assumptions to fulfill our need to know, but to replace the need to communicate. So basically, humans really want to know things, but we don't always want to ask questions, And so when you want to know something, but you don't really want to go get the information, you sort of make a generalization about how it works and, hope that that's good enough. Um, and part of the reason that he talked about that is because, Mimi talked about like the dream, and part of the dream is that like part of this like this assumption that we've been trained to have about our world is that there's some danger in asking questions, and making it clear that you don't know, or that you might or and to me I think we even sometimes see a danger in the idea that like because I have to ask about this might mean that I think differently about this than somebody. And there's danger in that too. What if I'm weird? What if they disagree with me? What if I'm rejected because of the way that I think this should be, And so that turns us off of asking those questions as well. But this agreement is don't make assumptions. And that is because, basically the argument is that it's always better to ask a question than to make an assumption. Um, yeah. One of the other things that they said, this idea that a lot of the times, we believe assumptions to the point that we're willing to destroy our relationships in order to defend those assumptions. I think that that's really important to acknowledge, because that, I think we've all seen that. I assume that you should live your life this way, or that you're making this choice for this reason, and therefore we can't be associated anymore. Um, uh, and yeah, I think that, like, if you value relationships and, you know, uh, keeping relationships, I think it's important to be wary of when you're doing that. And then the last thing on this one, I think, is just he says that without making assumptions, your word becomes impeccable. So, just like the way that all of these agreements kind of like feed into each other, this one is one of those ones that enables you to do the first agreement, because it it motivates you to speak up, and to recognize that the way that you do things isn't going to be the way that other people do things, and to stand on that anyway. So yeah, agreement number 3: don't make assumptions. Any questions or reflections or thoughts on this one so far?
I can share something if no one else has anything to say.
Please.
I think one of the most common assumptions that we make is that, like, the way that I use a word is the same thing that it means to somebody else. Like, we're constantly, we all have our own interpretations all the time. And I find that, like, especially with word use, like, I assume that what it means to me when I say it is going to be what it means to you, and you assume your own interpretation, and we often don't talk about what we meant when we said our words and how it might have meant different things to each of us. I'll give an example. So there's there's a couple stories that came to mind. So, and the first one definitely also ties into don't take anything personally. I have an older sister and we're really close. But we were having some like major tension a couple years ago, and we got into a big fight, and we were like somewhere out, and she was like, well, maybe you should just go home. And I, in the heat of the moment, maybe also after having a drink, was like, I'm having a good time out here. I'm good. I don't have a problem. Bitch, maybe you should go home. Not one of my best moments. And that word meant something very different to her than what it means to me. The B word I use regularly. I claim it, like, and to me, it is it the intention of how you use it, matters. And to me, like, I will claim the word, like, yeah, I'm a bitch. I'm that
Spend
bitch.
too much time around black people.
I'm not touching that. But but like, and it can be, an empowering word for a woman to claim it. And it can mean, that I'm strong and I don't care what you think. And yeah, different things. And it just like set her off, and we got in this whole thing. I mean, it was one of the worst nights ever, and I just didn't know how we were going to be able to make it okay. But I went to her the next day, and we were like, let's try to like talk about this, and like we got to that. That was a big trigger, and she really tried to understand how that word to me meant something very different and I use it regularly, where for her, it's a very different experience. And I actually just had this conversation with another friend of mine, Deidre, who is like in my parents' generation. And me, Tara, and Deidre just had this conversation last night also about the B word, because Deidre does not like that word. She doesn't say it, she doesn't use it, she doesn't appreciate it. And we talked about why, and just out of her experience, like what it represents is like demeaning women, and also even women in trying to defend their power, like identifying with an aggressive, more masculine approach to what it means to be powerful, redefining ourselves as powerful in terms of a masculine element of aggression, versus what she considers to be, you know, the feminine essence or divine feminine or whatever. But we had this whole dialogue, and just like it was, and her and we were, it was I felt a very beautiful moment, because we were able to look at what it meant to each of us that was different and why, and we didn't have to invalidate what it meant to the other person. And often I find that we don't do that. We don't allow
I
ourselves,
feel like eating. There's food across the street. Mimi cooked today.
we don't make time for conversation to even define what those words mean to each of us when we use them. But literally a simple practice that I see Im do all the time to address that, like on a daily basis, he'll realize that moment in a conversation when people are using a word and it can probably be interpreted different ways, and he'll just be like, hey, what does that mean to you when you say that? What does it mean to you when you say that? And if you can find those times, I think that is a practice that helps us not only make less assumptions, but like understand each other on a much deeper level.
I would definitely agree with you, and I like that was like how you interpreted that, or just like an application like of that. I think that I've started to change my approach to conversations with people, where like if somebody says something that like has me rubbed the wrong way, because I can be an argumentative person and I do have the time and I do have the energy.
You?
But when somebody says
Really?
something, you said what?
I said, really? You?
Haha. But when somebody says something that rubs me the wrong way, like genuinely, my go-to response lately has been, "What do you mean by that?" Or like, "How do you mean?" Because like I think that I find myself wanting to jump in, but I'm also like, let me understand what you're saying before I'm like, okay, now we have an issue. But also, I have a friend who I feel like we still kind of find ourselves like arguing about things, only to ultimately end up finding out that we agree once we define all of the things that we're talking through. And I've had so many conversations with this person where I'm like, wait, hold on, I think we agree. Like I think that we're saying the same thing actually, like to the T. It's just interesting how you use those words to like get to that conclusion, because that's not what I would have said. But yeah, I definitely agree with you.
Thanks for sharing. Totally. That happens all the time. People are like arguing. They're like, I think we agree. We're just saying it differently.
Yeah. There was oh man, what was I gonna say? Yeah, I think one of the things that really sticks with me from the don't take things personally agreement is this idea that like we make the assumption that somebody thinks the same way that we think, and therefore when we don't, we feel like we have to compete, you know, for one of us to be right, or one version of the other person's reality to be true. And yeah, I definitely think that like I like, cause like and then I think on the flip side of that, you know, like to Donna's point, there's the assumption that somebody sees things differently than you that we make sometimes, you know? I think I see that a lot in terms of like conversations around like the American, like, the in terms of like the American political divide, because, like I think that people kind of want to live in the same kind of world, you know? Everybody's just like very differently informed about like what it takes to get there from the perspective of like, you know, policy and all that. And that's not to say that that stuff isn't important, but I do think that like if folks paid more attention to, well, less about how you think we should get there, what kind of world are you trying to live in? Then it would be much easier to have conversations about, okay, based on where we are now, here's what the best next step to getting there is. So, yeah. Nas has something he wants to add.
I want to ask, why do you guys think the author chose to use the word assumptions here? He could have used a lot of different terms for what not to do in this aspect, but he used assumptions. I think that with this term,
I was just
Jen
gonna
asked
say,
me.
because when you assume, you make an ass out of you and me.
I love that. I love that. Jen asked me as well what I thought on that piece, and definitely it does make an ass out of you and me. And there's, I think with this term, there's kind of a buy-in, understanding that for an assumption to be made, you came to a conclusion without having all the facts. And I don't know, sometimes that's intentional or unintentional. Mm. And I think that's why he used this piece here, because it's not always about you making that decision, but maybe not making the decision because you made it. Maybe it's intentional versus unintentional. Go ahead.
Speak more to like some of the another like term or something that you feel like might have been able to use for this one, and then like maybe speak to like how that term might like change the meaning, if that makes sense.
Another term he could have used. I don't think I got a clean one off the top of my head, but something along the lines of it would have to be a sentence. I really think he chose like a perfect word for here, and I don't think there's another a synonym that would work. But I think I could speak to if he chose another word, how it would change the message that he's giving across. Mm. For an assumption.
Well, I say
Oh, I thought he was muted. Oh, my bad, boss. I'm gonna let you talk. Go ahead, Khalil. You muted.
I think you asked a great question, Nas, and I was pushing myself to try to think, but then it made me reflect on that. Unfortunately, and this probably is true, assumptions in themselves just have a pejorative context because there's implication that you don't have enough information. But however, assumptions, whether you agree or not, are informed by they're informed by your precautions, they're informed by your predispositions, they're informed by your discernment. And so yes, I'm assuming I'm walking to this environment and I am making an assumption that's going to be an issue. I just think about something in our space we were dealing with the other day with the Ethers Nights Festival, and there was some conversation about a particular person in the space that could potentially is disruptive. And we had, but here's the thing, we have enough history with that person in these environments to know he's disruptive. One, two, the interaction that got us in the conversation about the situation, let us know that was a trick. It was a triggering moment. That's where we seen him act. And so for us to take measure and to try to mitigate that on the front end, because we assume, maybe not assume, maybe another word, Nas, or just a qualifier is just some understanding of the difference between assumption and precaution or assumption and discernment. because your assumptions are guided by something that a previous experience or something. And you should be cognizant of all the messaging you're getting, whether it's assumed, whether it's presumed, whether it's confirmed or not. When you are in tune, that's important. But I think just like with this agreement, like all three of them, they're also interconnected, intertwined. And if you are being impeccable with your words, or you're being intentional about, that you are thinking about the other person or the people that you're engaging with, those things, by doing those things, talking, being assertive, and all those things will help you mitigate or at least come to grips or work through those assumptions to get to the other side. So that's what I say.
Yeah. Yeah.
I
Yeah.
couldn't
Go for it.
I couldn't think of a better word, but I feel like it's like the opposite of inquiry.
Mm. Yeah. Yeah, I think I don't I think I agree with that. Like I don't know, like this idea that assumptions fulfill the need to know but replace the need to communicate. Like I don't know if there's a better word to describe that relationship. Um, because for me, yeah, like I feel like that really outlines just like a lot of the way that people interact with each other and look at the world, like they want certainty, but they don't want to do the work of like, um, you know, investigating and asking questions and like exposing themselves to things that are unfamiliar to them. And I think that that's another part of it, that exposing, I think that like we assume that things are ways that are familiar to us, like nobody assumes that somebody's going to do something that they can't expect, so it's always going to come from a place of like, well, this is what I've experienced, this is what I've seen before, so this is probably what it's going to be, you know just a really interesting, yeah, that pattern recognition, man. uh, the traps that it creates for us.
I have a thought on that, but I want to make space if anybody else wants to share a reflection.
Yeah, I don't know, I'd love to hear from Zalalem or Tara.
Now, okay, Chanelu. I was just thinking about the gap between like when you're growing up and learning what discernment is, the what's the gap between assumption and discernment? Or how does one develop that without making, I don't know, I don't think you can do it without making assumptions. I think assumptions do inform part of young people or people who like have no scope for things. But they are rooted in like schemas and like the categories our brains derive, albeit irrational and not rational. So I definitely hear the Toltec way is like out like a little bit more outside of like the way I already think too. So I was just like, okay, if I'm not to approach building my discernment by not making assumptions, how do you do it? What do I need to sense, and like is there a fine line between the two? Those are just my inner thoughts spilling out. Thank you for asking.
No, go for it.
I think my 2 cents on discernment versus assumptions. I would have to say that I agree with you to an extent on your piece about assumptions being a part of being a young person. When you don't know anything, you kind of don't have a choice. And maybe it should be don't make assumptions if you don't have to. And that's another part of discernment and learning when is that and what does that look like. And that might not be a perfect answer, but that's kind of where my head went after hearing that.
No, I'll definitely second that. I think that like discernment is what happens, is like I think Nas said it well. Like discernment is what happens when all you can do is make assumptions. Like when all that's left is assumptions to make, because you've gathered all the information that you can. Um, yeah, and I do think that like, when, you make more assumptions, the more unfamiliar you are with something, and then the more familiar you become with it, I think like the better you are equipped to navigate those some of the nuances that come with all things. Yeah. Mimi, what were you gonna jump in with?
Um, you mentioned that he says assumptions fill the need of us wanting to know, while not, I'm think I might mess this up, but um, not requiring us to communicate. How did you say it again?
Uh, Fulfilling the need to know, but replacing the desire to communicate,
Yeah. Yeah, and you talked about like people often not wanting
or
to
the need to communicate. Yeah, continue.
like do that like inquiry and get into these sort of debates and I would say just like murky waters with each other. Um, and everything that we talk about as challenges we face in life, I'm looking at how do we address those in ourselves and as a community. And so for me, that's understanding like deeply what's at the root of it and looking for like leverage points, like where is there possibility for change in this, and what does that look like as a practice? Like how can I actually apply that, put it into action, put it into practice in my daily life? And so I think again, it's sort of to me tied to the idea of I and our wanting to be secure um, in this idea of like what I am, what I am not, what is true, what is false, what is wrong, what is right, what is real, what is not. And we often, I think, are trained, or we want those things to be static. We really prefer to simplify, turn things into black and white. And the more I've lived, the more I've come to believe that most things are gray. And like a lot of things in actual life are full of contradictions and two things that feel like they shouldn't exist at the same time, but they do. And I think people often have this desire to feel secure and comfortable in the fact that something is a fact. And when you enter into a conversation with someone who sees things differently than you and who their basic understanding of a word is different from your own, it can cause you to put everything you know into question. And for a lot of people, that's just really uncomfortable and makes them feel really insecure. And I think that like finding ways to help us be more at peace, curious about the idea of like what we don't know for sure, and just the unknown is something that you can cultivate to help people step into conversations um, with across like places where we're very different, because you're more open to and okay with exploring the unknown and the discomfort of being disoriented about what you think you know.
Yeah, I think that that's why those first two agreements are so important in that as well, because it's, like you need that to be able to communicate, like being impeccable with your word is about like understanding where the limits of your understanding are. And then like not taking anything personal means like accepting like it's okay to not know and to ask questions regardless of how people like react or treat you for like seeking those answers that you need, So I definitely think like, communicate, the need to communicate is really the one of the biggest things in this whole one to me, because it's like I think a lot of people forget that like you do actually have to talk to people to understand them, and to understand what they think and why they do things. Um,
And you can't judge if you're really trying to understand. You can't start
yeah,
judging if it's right or wrong. That's hard.
absolutely. Yeah, yeah. Anything else on this one for now before we move on to the next? Alrighty. So, agreement number 4 is always do your best. Um, and this is sort of like it kind of reminds me of like the 7 habits of highly effective people. Sharpen the saw, because the first thing that he says in this chapter is that like this is the agreement that allows you to turn the other agreements into habits. Um, and this one is exactly what it sounds like. It's about just like always striving in everything you do, but especially in these 4 agreements to always do no more or no less than your best. And that no more or no less part is really key. Because like, obviously if you do less than your best, you'll feel bad, you'll feel shame, you'll feel guilt, you'll feel judgment of yourself, blah, 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 blah. Oh, my wasted potential, all the things I could be doing. But if you try to do more than your best, you burn yourself out. And then you can't even do your best, consistently because you've wasted your energy trying to do the impossible, which is exceed, your capability. They use this story of like, basically, this man goes to this Buddhist master and he's like, Master, how many hours a day should I meditate if I want to seek and if I want enlightenment? And the Buddhist master is like, if you meditate for 2 hours a day, maybe you'll reach enlightenment in 5 years. And the guy thinks for a little bit and he's like, okay, what if I meditate for 4 hours a day? And the Buddhist master's like, okay, if you meditate for 4 hours a day instead of two, you might reach enlightenment in 10 years. And the guy's like, does it take longer to reach enlightenment when I spend more time meditating? And the Buddhist is basically like, you're not here to give away anything or to sacrifice your joy or your life. You're here to live and to enjoy life. And so if you can meditate really well for 2 hours, but do it for four anyway, then you miss out on that life, and you basically waste 2 hours, and then you miss the point, and it'll just take you longer because you're wasting your time. So yeah, I think that like that was something that definitely stuck with me. Just the idea that just you don't have to do better than your best, because and if you do, you'll end up with diminishing returns. Um, I think that I'm going to finish the summary and then I'm going to pass it to you, Nas. I think that the other thing that stood out to me is just this idea that doing your best is really about taking action, the action of doing something and not because you expect a reward from it, not because you expect to get better from it, but just because you love it. He used the example of Forrest Gump. I don't know if anybody's seen that movie. I haven't, but I know the basic premise. But basically, there's this character, this guy, Forrest Gump, and he's not what folks would consider the smartest, or the most strategic, but he just does. He's just always moving forward and on to the next thing. And so, because of that, he lives a very full and rewarding life. But it's not even about the rewards for him. He just likes to live. That's what the saying is, mama, like life is like a box of chocolates because you never know what you're gonna get. So you just eat them one by one. So uh uh so basically, Don Miguel's like, taking action is what it means to be alive. And like the more action you take, the more practice you get at living, the better you get at doing that. He says that By always doing your best, you become a master of transformation. And practice at doing your best is what makes you that master, and that action is what makes that difference. And I think it also, and this is the last thing I'll say, and then I'll pass it to Nas. I think it also takes me back to something that Jay Rue brought up at the beginning of the conversation when we were talking about the challenges of not taking things personally. And basically, he was just like, I'm a human being. There are some things that I'm going to take pretty personally. And I think that like this agreement kind of acknowledges that. Like he literally says, like, you're not always going to be impeccable with your word. You're always not going to not take things personally. You're not always going to, seek inquiry and like not make assumptions. But you should always, do the best that you can, And also, there's this idea that just like your best is not the same all the time, Your best when you've just woken up, might be better than when you're like really like, like awoken and fresh, and like in it, Your best when you're on an empty stomach and exhausted might not be your best as when you're like well rested and full, And your best when you're like in emotional distress isn't going to be the same as your best when you're in a good place emotionally. So, just understanding that your best is always changing, and it's just about understanding where your best is at any given moment and always striving to do no more, no less than that. So yeah, I'll pass it to Nas.
Definitely well said. And I think on that idea of your best isn't going to be the same
Is it
depending
possible
on.
to like hold the mic closer? You just sound a little quieter than Chin.
Oh, for sure. Can you hear me? Can you hear me?
Yeah, thank you.
Okay. I feel like your best, Chin said it, it's not going to be the same if you woke up early versus woke up late, on an empty stomach versus not an empty stomach. And your internal best is going to move and fluctuate. And that's important. I think it's important to look at how sometimes we can compare our best to someone else's best. A doctor's best, a lawyer's best, a zookeeper's best looks different. And your best is going to look very different every day. So allow yourself some space and allow yourself some grace to experience your best every day, please. Love y'all.
Yeah, big on that piece about not holding yourself to somebody else's best. Yeah. Mimi,
Dang
are
it.
you playing in dirt?
Donna. We lost Donna and Jin.
Yeah, we lost Donna, we lost J. Rue.
Dang.
Are you playing in dirt?
Maybe.
Can we see?
I'm working on clearing. There's actually like a stone walkway from our house back to this little area, but it's all grown over. I'm working on clearing it.
Oh, nice. Very cool. Did you have something that you wanted to say about doing your best?
The story that you told about meditation just made me think about this book called Meditation in Action by Chogyam Trungpa Rinpoche. So who's a Buddhist teacher, and so it's called Meditation in Action, and he speaks very much to like what does it mean to actually take these ideas and apply them to your real living life, not just when you're like sitting on a cushion in a quiet room, but when you're like out in the world interacting with people and your friends and your kids and your partners and traffic and doing dishes. What does it mean to like practice meditation and that level? And I definitely recommend it. It's a short read, and it also speaks to this part that I keep coming back to in this conversation about, and I think J. even mentioned it, was like, I'm not the Buddha. It's just like some of the concepts out of that like worldview and philosophy around what it means to be an I. that I think impacts a lot of how we interpret and experience these things. And it's that's also like spoken to pretty well in that book, Meditation and Action. Other than that, amen to what y'all said. I think also, like, as far as one thing that I like struggled with or asked myself as I try to practice that always do your best over the years is like, how do I know when I'm doing my best? And I think that ultimately you got to get feedback from other people who know you, and but ultimately it's something you feel inside yourself. And when you don't do your best, your consciousness often doesn't let you rest about it. You have like this like unease, this unpeace, this like voice that stays in your head, and lets you know like, hey, I feel like you could have done better. Or that you're like, no, I know I sincerely tried my best. And that doesn't mean that you succeeded or did what you thought you should have done. But I think it's something you feel inside of yourself that you know that you tried your very best, or sometimes that you didn't.
Yeah, big on that last piece because one of the big pieces that he mentions is this idea that like there's no way to judge yourself if you know you're doing your best, because it's like what more do you want, and that's something that's very helpful for me in my day-to-day life. I deal with a lot of like I think like self-judgment and like over critique, just like in my internal world, and the reminder, at any given moment, like, well, could you have done that any better based on where you were at that moment, no. All right, let's move on, um, yeah, yeah.
Another concept out of sort of that Buddhist lane that I learned is this idea of aspirational practice. And you just kind of hold this balance of commitment, but also grace, to not expect yourself to be perfect, but that you're always striving for it, whatever it is, that you keep on striving and you're going to F it up. And then when you do, you just get back to trying again. So I really resonate with that and like see that as another commonality with this idea of always try your best.
Tara, please.
Yeah, can y'all hear me?
Yeah.
Yes.
Perfect. Yeah, I think, this concept, I immediately thought of like, the archetypes of like folks who like work like kind of in that meditation story that you brought up where the person was like, well, what if I meditate for like 4 hours a day and stuff like that? And it's like, I think that always trying your best also applies to knowing when you've reached your level and stuff. Like it's like, hey,
Yeah.
like you are satisfied and stuff because like this is good, you are enough. Because I also think that on a subconscious level, um, it can trying your best. It what am I trying to say? Like it's like it can also look like, oh, if I'm like, no, 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 no. No, it like lost in my head. No. Oh, okay. On a subconscious level, like, you know, we can kind of overwork ourselves and burn ourselves out as a way to kind of prove ourselves worthy and valuable and stuff. And it's like, at least to me, it's like that's not trying your best. That's you kind of on the opposite end of things, like working, burning yourself out to a point and like for like some sort of external validation that you're not going to get. Because to me, when I think of trying your best, it looks like, being very clear of like, okay, I know that I have more juice to do more, but then I also know that like this is the area where I need to slow down and rejuvenate and stuff like that. Because if I push myself even more, then I could be like, I'm reaching in the lane of like trying to prove myself worthy, trying to get some external validation. Um, and yeah, so it's very much a balance is what I'm hearing.
Can I ask you, like, so, how do you tell the difference between when your striving is driven by like you making your best effort versus when it's driven by like wanting to prove yourself or meet some other standard that may not be relevant or healthy for you?
Yeah, I feel like some giveaways is kind of like, because there are days where it's like I'll go home and I'm like exhausted and stuff, right? But then my heart will feel full. Like I'm like, okay, I feel like I like today was a good day. My people are good. I feel like that the, like, and even in those days where it's like if I did like push myself, like I feel like it was worth it, and I get like the internal validation from that and stuff. Versus if I go home and I'm exhausted and I'm like beating myself up, I'm like over criticizing myself. I'm like, dang, you could have did this, this, and this better and stuff like that. Then to me, that like lets me know that it's like, somewhere down the line, I needed to take a pause and rejuvenate and get some something and because at that point I had just kept going and I didn't take the time to be like to really think about like, okay, like first of all, you're crossing over to that threshold and stuff, so you need to take a pause, nourish yourself in some sort of capacity. um yeah, and I forgot the second point, but I'll just leave it there.
No, that was great. Thank you.
I was
Yeah,
gonna
great
speak.
question.
I was gonna speak to that as well, just because I think that piece around knowing when you've reached your level. What?
A little hard to hear you.
Hello, can you hear me now?
Yeah.
Yeah, that piece about like knowing when you've reached your level that Tara brought up is something that I think that I've been thinking about recently a lot in terms of my art, just because I feel like within the past like few months I've gotten really good at like understanding what that is for me. And typically it's like, it's when I start to get like frustrated or bored with a project, like I know I need to take a break, I have like a very iterative process, it's all about like, okay, this angle doesn't work. Let me try this one, like, no, this sentence doesn't convey what I'm trying to get at. Let me try this one, and when I start to run out of like different combinations, different things to try, that's when I know it's like, okay, we're not gonna get any further right now. You need to go refill the inspiration tank. And I think that something else that's in there is like, uh, uh, I think it's also helped me realize that like not every project needs to be finished. Sometimes ye, like I don't know, like sometimes it doesn't necessarily serve you to see something through to the end, if like you've gotten to a certain point and like it's already served its purpose, Um, like I
Yeah,
think like I have
the
what'd you
end,
say?
like the end may be different from what you thought it was going to
Yes.
be. But that
Exactly.
it's still,
Exactly.
yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Like, oh, this is over now. And we could keep stretching it out, but that would just be a waste of energy and time. Yeah. So
What that
yeah.
made me think of was like my last breakup. Uh,
Mm.
like some people might say like, I had this like long-term partnership for like 4.5 years, and it was very beautiful. And like we definitely at for a long time like thought that we would be together forever. There was just no question in our minds, but we kept on living, and things change, and at a certain point like we realized that it was over in that form. Um, And some people would think that is like almost a failure,
Mm-hmm.
but I don't see it that way at all. Like, I'm so thankful for that experience, and I feel like it served both of us, and we both like grew a lot and appreciated that. And like, it just because it didn't end the way that we wanted it to or thought that it would, like, didn't mean that it didn't serve this beautiful purpose or there was
Yeah.
anything wrong with that experience that we had.
Yeah. Is there Zalalem, Dad, Mrs. Fair? Y'all have any reflections or anything that you want to add at this point about this last agreement about always trying your best?
No, it's just been good to hear. I think just a good reminder for me to reread this book and especially this chapter. But my phone surely is about to die, so I'm gonna hop off
Yeah.
now. Thank you guys for the conversation today.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you, love. Thank you,
Peace.
your presence.
I can add something else.
Oh, you sound like a robot a little bit.
Oh, not again.
Oh, you're
Oh,
back.
there, you're back. You're back.
Wait, I'm back.
Yeah.
Okay. Just let me know if I start getting robot-y and I'll add in the chat. But no, this just also just reminds me of, to have to achieve your best, there has to be a layer of awareness and acceptance and a connectedness to your instincts. Like when Mimi had brought up, the story about like the breakup, and then Chin, when you brought up like the art practice and stuff like that, it's like we have to be aware that it's like, hey, like this right now is like it's good where it's at and stuff. And it's like it can be counterproductive if we just like keep going and stuff like that versus like trying to just accept, the beauty for what it was and stuff, even if that doesn't necessarily continue. Because there's very few things in life that are like meant to go on forever. So it's just like, and I think that's just more of just leaning into like living in the present and like enjoying and like fully embracing those moments when they're there.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. And I think to me that gets back to that piece just around like embracing whatever your best is in any given moment. Yeah. I think you spoke to that really well.
Yeah, that was well said. I don't know if you might already be planning to answer this, Chin, but the um, the only other question I have for now is how do these concepts, how do you use them when you're doing conflict transformation? And do you have
Oh,
stories?
yes. That part. um, yeah, so for me, I think we spoke to the piece around assumptions a little bit already. I think that like it changes the way that I approach conflict because it removes the need to get defensive, to try to prove somebody else wrong, and to like feel the need to defend a position with my life, because I'm like I'm already coming from a place of, well, this person might see things differently from me, and that's okay, is another assumption that well, I guess like that is an assumption that I don't know. I guess I don't always make that assumption. It might be okay, it might not be okay, but regardless, we're gonna just ask the question and see. It encourages me to move from a space of inquiry, and that inquiry is like one of the main tools in the conflict transformation toolbox. Just like gaining that deeper understanding of like what's going on with you, what's going on with the other person, and then using those together to determine like, what's going on with y'all, Like, how can y'all continue to coexist, you know, and be in relationship? Um, and then as for always doing your best, I think that the important thing with that one is just like, you know, one, I think it's the sort of like it is it's important. I think mainly because it helps you sharpen your other tools, which will help you with your conflict transformation practice. And I think it's also, I think, just understanding like, um, you know, sometimes it's best not to, your best is the decision not to step into something, you know? Like sometimes it's better not to get into it right now because your best at this moment is going to be screaming and yelling and cussing the motherfucker out, you know? And that's not that's not what you want in this situation, you know. You want a different best right now, you know. So let's back down and come to this a little bit later. um and then I also think it's understanding that, like, you know, you're not always going to make that call really well in the moment, you know, and that afterwards your best is sometimes like owning up to, hey, this was not my best, you know, like I was not, I'm doing my best now by letting you know that I was not doing my best at that moment, you know, and I hope that you can appreciate my best, you know, as well as my worst, you know, if that makes sense. So, um, yeah, yeah. Did anybody else want to speak to that?
Call them out.
Let's see. I think I'd love to hear Khaled, I'd love to hear any reflections that you have, maybe specifically around like not making assumptions, and doing your best, and how that can help you navigate conflict.
Um, so whenever you teach yourself how to not beat yourself up for doing your best,
I can't hear
um,
you. I'm sorry.
okay. So whenever you practice, not beating yourself every time you do your best, um, first of all, it's a practice, so you'll get better at it. And second, uh, like you'll learn how to like, I feel like it ties in with like not taking things personal. So like if someone says, "Oh man, I told you to do this, why couldn't you do it better?" And then you go home and talk bad about yourself, but then let's say you've been practicing for like 3 months. Now you're like, okay, well now I know what to do next time and not beat myself up about it. Um, and plus it's like I don't. It's a waste of time to do it. I guess that's how I feel. It's a waste of time to beat yourself up. Um, but yeah, that's. And what was your second question? Or your first question?
Don't make assumptions. How does that one relate?
How do I relate to it? Don't make assumptions. I make assumptions a lot because I would get in trouble a lot. But now I'm learning that it's not trouble. It's just love taps. So you know, I don't think I can really answer that one. I haven't. I'm getting into it, but I couldn't answer that question.
Khaled, I think you have a way of putting things that makes it very clear and easy to understand. Are you interested in being a Scarabus consultant?
If you could let me know more about it, I could think about it.
Yeah, you think about it. We can talk terms.
Okay.
I want to ask Khaled, what type of experience do you think would have to come to you for you to be able to answer that question a little better about assumption?
What type of event would have to happen?
What type of experience would you have to
Experience. For me to not
answer the question, not make assumptions?
not make assumptions. What would have to happen to me? I think I would just have to be in the Kefir space a lot more and just practice everything that I can and learn everything that I can. Um, what else? But something that would have to happen, I would say, me taking action, which I'm doing now. So, yeah. Does that answer your question? Okay.
Yeah, more practice, man. That'll do it. Mrs. Fair, maybe to close us out, is there anything you wanted to say about these agreements of always do your best and don't make assumptions?
I'm here with M also. M, you got something you'd like to add about don't make assumptions and always do your best?
Well, you know they say about people that make assumptions, don't you?
We've already discussed it, make the ass.
Yeah, makes the ass out of you. So, uh, I think there's nothing wrong with making assumptions as long as you know you've made them, and then you're vetting them against the realities. So you're not going to always know, but to be clear that when you're making those choices, that are not grounded in knowing, but in assuming. I mean, it happens. Of course, you guys talk a little bit about it, but the main thing is inquiry. To create an attitude of moving through the world through inquiry serves you with one, getting information. Covey speaks to it. Seek first to understand and then be understood. I'll add that on that one. What was the second one? What was that last
Do
point?
your best.
Well, do your best. Y'all cover that. Do your best, man. And if you don't, own it. And then come back the next day and do your best. Your best don't mean that it's going to be perfect. It just means that you've given. I would say, don't fool yourself. Be honest with yourself. And then out of that, if you really get good at it, you ask others to get feedback. Not because you're looking for validation, but you're looking for the critique to improve the quality of your own stuff. I need to help I was trying to be in the background ear hustle.
Uh-huh. And I like what College said, and don't beat yourself up. A critique is just that. It's not a criticism. You assumed you were doing something the right way. And if somebody gives you a critique on what you did, if you can just have enough sense to take what they said and say, could I have improved what I did? That's what that's supposed to be for. The easy thing is for somebody to say, good job, good job. You know you didn't do the best you could. They really do believe you could have done better. So assumptions. You assumed that you were doing it the right way. Like Holly said, don't beat yourself up about it. Take what they said and try to improve. That's the thing on assumptions. And the thing about assumptions is that's how you do scenario planning. You assume that something could happen, and if it could, what will you do about it? How will you be prepared? So it's not that doesn't make assumptions a good thing, but it does make assumptions something important that you ought to use and use in your life. And as far as doing your best, it's like going to school every day and never getting anything out of it because the teacher didn't say it the right way, or the classroom wasn't nice, or for any reason. When you do your best, you are educating yourself to do what needs to be done for you and the community you live in. Because don't forget, that's where you live, inside the community. So to do your best and encourage other people to do their best so that the place that you are living now and you plan to live in the future can be the best that it can be. Slackers always have to hang on to other people to make a way for them. And I'm afraid to say, you might just be that way for them because you're going to be trying to do your best and encourage them to do their best. None of this good job, because they lifted their hand. Good job, because they put a pencil to paper. If they didn't do shit like it's supposed to be done, let them know, help them grow. So those are my statements on assumptions and doing your best.
And with that, Chan, do you have any follow-up questions for Ms. Fair?
No, man, I think that was great. Yeah.
Good job. Good job.
I know Mrs. Fair always does her best.
Oh, yes, sir, buddy. You know, you get the gift of life and you squander it by just showing up every day, just showing up. Well, whatever happens, happens. You know, you get to be 82 years old and you can't think back on nothing you've really done in life that makes you who you are. You've just been gliding along, waiting for somebody to make a way for you. So that's why you do your best. You do your best for you.
Hmm. Yeah. Anything else anybody want to follow up with or add or ask on that?
Well, I just want to ditto the piece about assumptions, because like in life, like most of this stuff is unknown to us, and even like when we think we know, a lot of times we don't. We just have a very small fraction of understanding of like what we're experiencing, and so we have to constantly make assumptions in order to make decisions. I mean, it's very necessary, and sometimes you don't want to not make a decision because you don't want to assume. But I agree with Im. It's very important to be aware of your assumptions, and like looking at how that could impact things, or it might be this way or it might be that way. I'm going to assume this, so here's what I'm going to do. Yeah, I think that's a very necessary practice. And then also being able to identify, like, when does unpacking this assumption really serve this relationship or this process for us to move forward?
Yeah.
I also just on, like, you made me think when always do your best as it relates to conflict. Like, I think to me it really connects to forgiveness.
Yes.
Because sometimes people really hurt you, and they were doing their best. And like, I think that when you can know that and forgive someone and give them grace, it's just essential for relationships and for your own like peace and sustainability. It's hard to be in relationship with yourself, and it's hard to be in relationship with others when you can't practice forgiveness. And sometimes it really is just giving someone the grace of like, this might not have gone the way that I wish that it would, and it impacted me. But I understand that they tried their best, and maybe they messed up, or they couldn't do what I thought that they should do. We all do that sometimes, not to excuse ourselves, but to give each other grace so we can have forgiveness.
Well said, Mimi. Well said. Well, yeah. We're about at time for the night, so I don't have anything else to add or ask. I think it's been a very robust and deep conversation tonight. Anything anybody wanna leave us with or close us out with? Or maybe we'll let Mimi have the last word. Of course, I always get the last word, but
Well, I'll just say I see like next steps for us as like just continuing, not that this is going to be, it's not urgent, but planting a seed. And I'll be thinking about how do we turn these things into like tangible framework or a process for someone to go through, like being like, here's the mindsets you need to practice this, here's the behaviors that help you practice this. how do we help make these things applicable, real on that, and see where we take it in our work together. But other than that, I would just say that if like people enjoyed this or want to know more, this is like part of what we do in our consulting work, is like use our collective and individual experiences with conflict and like self-mastery and community wealth building to share what we've learned and help people who want to practice, living out similar values. And so Scarabus Consulting, we do like individual or team coaching. Like we can counsel people in a very like direct coaching role. We can also put on like workshops for teams that are around these different topics, around like conflict, around like intergenerational relationships, all these things that go into like community building and institution building. And then we also have a residency program. So people can come and stay on our like community campuses and immerse themselves in cooperative living, where we practice these things all day, every day, and you can really experience it in real time and take that home with you forever. So that's all I'll add. I appreciate y'all. This was nourishing. So thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and thank you, Mimi, for shouting out that Scarabus piece. Gotta represent. Yeah, and further on, also along those lines, uh, our second book study session this month, which will be the 21st, if my math is correct, third Wednesday this month. We'll be sort of continuing this conversation with a workshop around conflict transformation that digs more deeply into how these agreements can be used in your conflict transformation approach, specifically just looking at the various tools and techniques that come with conflict transformation. So if you're interested in learning a little bit more about that, more on that piece around like tools and how to apply this framework, yeah, definitely join us for that conversation on the 21st. Also find us on Alchemy Plus, where we have a lot of our learning community and some other like virtual materials for learning there. And yeah, I'll also be thinking about how we can, turn this into more of like a learning framework, because I think that's very interesting. I know that there are some guidebooks and stuff that come like with some of these like four agreements and beyond fear. So maybe that's something that we can do some. We'll talk more about that offline. Don't want to give too much of the process away.
And I'm like, for us too, it's also weaving together like all these different
Yeah.
things that like, cause like Im mentioned like 7 habits, like we talked about like meditation and action, and then like our own, like we have had decades of experiences of practicing this and like across generations too. Like you have like Im and Mrs. Fair's perspectives, and then you have like our perspectives as younger people, and so it's like I see a very unique fusion for us of the different places that we
I've been saying, man, it's time to just start writing books. It's time to just start putting Kepra books out. I know we all have our feelings about the written word, but
yeah.
yeah.
Guided meditations.
Tara says, I have ideas. Yes, it's coming. But yeah, thank you everybody for joining us today. Thanks everybody who joined us live during the conversation, everybody who's watching the recording later on somewhere. Appreciate all of you, all your support, all of your engagement. Yeah, join us next week for an intergenerational conversation about education, and the week after that for a continuation of this workshop, more along the lines of conflict transformation. Check out scarabus.com, our newly refurbished website, to learn more about how to get in touch with our consulting services, our mentorship and coaching services, or come
And
connect with us for a residency.
I'd like to shout out the recorder for collaborating with us to
Yes.
live stream this out to people who were not able to either come in or zoom in.
Yeah, you were right ahead of me, Mrs. Fair. Shout out to the Indianapolis Recorder, a long time community institution, storytelling force in Indianapolis's Black community, and a content partner with the Mumbo Jumbo program, supporting us for a very long time with this initiative right now. And as always, if you want to support us, support the work that we do here at the Kepler Institute, support our ability to have these weekly conversations, visit donate.kepler.org and leave us a donation. Yeah, and I think that's all we got for today.
Donate.kepler.org.
And make a donation. Don't just go there to look at the page. Alrighty. Thanks, y'all.
Do it now.